Hello, and let's wade into the most difficult discussion that often comes up now, the power of Indian business. At every discussion, this comes up. Are there a few industrial groups which have come to develop an inordinate power in India over politics, obviously over business, and therefore over people's lives? And what does this imply? As a maverick observer of the Indian economy, I take these discussions with you every month, every fortnight, and it gives me a great feeling when you listen on to it, watch it, and most important, you click on the bell icon to ensure that you get these discussions promptly and on time. So on with our story. Standard & Poor's global rating came up with a very interesting data this week. The data says that over the next decade, that is from 2024 to 2034, give and take a few years, there will be an additional $800 billion of investment in the Indian economy by the top 5 industrial groups. Now remember, that's not only reason to feel happy about, it's also even more happier news because these are from numbers which have already been made public. So the chances are that the numbers will be larger rather than less as we go ahead. But what are the implications? And that's what we want to talk about. First of all is that discussion that always comes, too much of industrial concentration, inequality. I don't agree to that point of view. Why don't I? Because when I wasn't essentially planning to invest at any scale in these sort of investments, neither I think were you. But what were we looking for? Quality jobs. As investments of this scale comes along, there will be more such quality, much more, massively bigger number of quality jobs that will be coming into the Indian economy from this scale of investment. What is the scale of investment? $800 billion is much more than the investments made in the last decade. How much more? 3 times more. So it is that scale of investment that is coming into the Indian economy. Former RBI Deputy Governor Viral Acharya has said that it may be a better idea to cut the industrial conglomerates into smaller groups to allow for more competitive pressures in the Indian economy. But the data shows that instead the reverse is happening, more concentration of industrial groups within industrial groups is happening. But remember, while inequality is not the issue, what is the big issue then? That's for the economists and others to think whether the top 1% is doing what, and that's really isn't important for you and me, and also for the proverbial common Admi, the person on the street, Aam Admi, Aam Mahila. So what is important? The important thing is, I am saying it's going to be top 5 industrial groups. Which are these 5 industrial groups? As you can see in the list, it's the Tata, the Adanis, Ambanis, JSW and Vedanta. They are the ones who will be making this $800 billion of investment. Others come far behind. What does that mean? It means that the industrial complex of India is getting to be, or has getting to be, more concentrated among fewer industrial groups. And when that happens, obviously, a very interesting corollary is about their political tendencies. Why? Because the same S&P Global Ratings report shows that about 30% of this investment will be in new economy business. What are these sectors? It's new energy, semiconductor, aviation, electrical vehicles, data warehouse, ports, all of these are very, very new sectors. We are not talking about just manufacturing steel or sending out or manufacturing buses or FMCG and others. So, in that sort of an environment, when the risks are high, because this would mean that these sectors, as you can see, will be facing rapid technological change. New technologies will come, technological obsolescence will happen, and so therefore, capital will have to be very smart, moving between opportunities. In that sort of circumstance, what will these groups look at? Well, they will look at that the political formation obviously will sort of either be agnostic about the technology or slightly veer towards a favorable technology, and that is inevitable. And the second part, that the policies that are made, the policies will tend to be stable, long term and generally favorable to them. So, now that means, and why did I say so? Because I said that the risks are going to be very high and at a much larger scale. Remember, the risky investments we are talking about is more than the investments that have been made by in aggregate in the last 10 to 15 years. So, this investment, this scale of investment that is going to come into Indian economy will obviously look for political stability, which means that the political formations will have to understand the needs of these businesses, and political formations which do not or sort of do not understand or do not get closer to the needs will find it more difficult. So, that is how the lay of the land is, even without naming groups or parties, and I do not want to go into there because these things could change, but the essential principle does not change. In that sort of circumstance, if with the high risk capital, yet a huge amount of risk capital pouring into the Indian economy, what does it also mean for the financial sector? Well, a data, and this data I am going to talk about is about the debt equity ratio. The companies will need massive amount of equity, but will also need to raise capital from financial institutions. Now, Indian institutions, Indian groups, industrial groups in the past 30 years, and this report shows, have actually become very skittish about raising debt. Their debt equity ratio, their leverage ratio has come down from 1.82 in 1991-92 to less than 0.90 in 2021. It is probably even lower now. What does that compare with globally? In USA, it is 0.90. Remember, US is the US economy, and in India, you can imagine with a much smaller economy what such a smaller debt equity ratio means for the larger groups. That means that they are borrowing less. And why? Because of the same factors that they want to be politically correct, because borrowing does mean that sort of a factor. So, given that these sort of circumstances, what I essentially see is that the Indian economy is on the cusp of very big investment. These investments will be concentrated in a very few industrial groups, much more concentrated than it is now. 3, when that happens, that means good jobs for us, because there is much larger investment at a scale we have never had, but it also means that political formations will be much more aligned with the interests of the industrial groups. And in that case, it will be a very interesting lay of the land as to what will happen to the Indian financial sector also. As I said, and this data shows that the debt equity ratio of the Indian companies have come down. So, therefore, they will now to raise their borrowings more, which the finance minister has been talking about. Certain larger macroeconomic changes will be happening or have begun to happen. And that is all post Diwali, as we step into a new era in the world economy with a new government in USA, new ICC in India, we will look forward to. And that is all from this edition of 1 Point. For a detailed description of what we discussed here, please visit my Substack. The link is in the description below. Thank you.